Welcome to our latest episode of Innovators and Entrepreneurs. We're going to try a little something different today. First, I'm going to introduce our panel, and then Noor, our student here, third year, is going to set the stage for what should be a really cool conversation. So to start with our panelists, Rod Schultz is the CEO of Bolster AI. Rod and I go way back. We grew up together in Durham. With over 25 years of experience in business strategy, secure technology and development, and SaaS innovation, Rod brings a wealth of expertise and a strong vision for Bolster's mission. Having previously held leadership positions at industry giants like Cisco, Adobe, Apple, and Zoom, Rod's background aligns perfectly with Bolster's commitment to combating phishing and impersonation threats through cutting-edge AI solutions. So thanks to Rod for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We've got Dustin Marlin, who in addition to teaching privacy this semester, Dustin's an associate professor and the director of Carolina Law's Intellectual Property Clinic, where he works with students to provide legal services to entrepreneurs, startups, and creators with a focus on trademark and brand development. His scholarship explores trademark law, the right of publicity, and the intersection of law, technology, and culture. Prior to joining UNC, Dustin practiced at leading law firms and has extensive experience in intellectual property and business law. So thanks to Dustin. So Noor Sandhu is a third-year law student at the University of North Carolina School of Law. She's the first Carolina law student to receive the International Association of Privacy Professionals Weston Fellowship. Congratulations. It's one of the most competitive honors in the field of privacy and data protection law, and she'll be in Washington, D.C. when she graduates. She serves as the law student liaison for the North Carolina Bar Association Privacy and Data Security Section, and she's also the founder and president of the UNC Law Privacy Law Organization. That's a mouthful. So thank you for being here. And now I'm going to kick it over to Noor. She's going to set the stage here for us.
So let me set the stage for today's discussion. If information wants to be free, how do you build technical barriers along with enforceable legal policies to protect businesses built on trademarks, brands, and digital rights? So copyright for music, books, movies, etc. The internet brings a cost of distribution to almost nothing, and preventing the copying of trademark, brand, and copyright is not simple. And enforcing those rights is just as difficult. Legacy business models originated when copying something like CDs, DVDs, books, high-quality logos, and more was difficult. Now that information can be copied by virtually anyone seamlessly with a touch of a button. Napster ripped apart the music industry when it was released in 1999. It pushed the needs for the creation of the iTunes Music Store, which then gave birth to the modern-day streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. Napster unbundled music from something that was difficult to copy and then distribute with CDs, and the music world has never been the same since. Time and time again, technology moves faster than legal and regulatory barriers, and the business models struggle to keep up. Today, we are seeing something very similar with AI. Anything can be duplicated. The level of skill to create perfect forgeries of websites, brands, pretty much anything, has been reduced to almost nothing. Criminal enterprises always have first mover advantage with technology, and one could argue that Napster was just a criminal enterprise in disguise. And the world is struggling to keep up as fraud, cybercrime, and disinformation, like deepfakes, get distributed faster than the system can respond.
So thanks for that history, Noor. So Rod, with that background in mind, it sounds like you're doing something that could be extremely disruptive and disruptive in a good way. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about your career and this venture.
Yeah, absolutely. So career-wise, graduated from North Carolina in 1996. We're sitting right next to one of the buildings that used to make my heart race every time I walked into it, Phillips, because I took so many math classes here. But, I went, my first job out of school was at Cisco, helping to build the backbone of the internet. From there, I went over to Apple, worked on the first iPhone, worked on iPods, iTunes, worked on the first Apple TV. And got to kind of see this, emergence of mobile compute along with music distribution, as Noor spoke about earlier. That opportunity was really, created for me based upon the disruption of Napster at that time. And I think what you're going to see time and time again is we're going from, a time of scarcity to a time of abundance. with information and the internet, it went from, it was hard and scarce to get access to that information. Then now it became very easy to get and grasp by anybody if you could, run a query on Google. With Napster, we went from, scarcity of music, bound to a CD, to an abundance of music. With AI today, we're going from scarcity of, or the difficulty of creating something, right? So scarcity of like authenticity to now abundance of anything. And what you're going to see time and time again is that business models, take a while to catch up. Rules, regulations, governments have a hard time figuring out how to keep these things in check. And the world starts to benefit in certain ways, and it really suffers in certain ways. I've spent my career putting together technologies that either try to harness, this growth, suppress that growth or control it, or prevent it. And that's what we're doing today at Bolster. We identify the exploitation of brand name, image, and likeness for our customers, and then we take it down. So we find fake websites for our customers, we take them off the internet. We find fake social media profiles, we take them down. Fake App Store apps, we take them down. So this is the new attack surface of choice by criminal enterprise, because you cannot digitally control your brand name, image, and likeness. You have to publish it, and once you publish it, it's out of your control. And so that now moves you into the regulatory, legal-facing aspect of it.
Thank you. That's great.
Great. So, Rod, can you talk to us a little bit more about these waves of disruption caused by technology throughout history, and have they always gone according to plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I would say I credit my entire career by riding these waves of disruption that I never actually thought about until I started trying to look back and connect the dots. They absolutely never go according to plan. There's unintended consequences of everything. There's the good and the bad, and I think you're seeing it, from the internet to music to even video conferencing. When I was at Zoom, right, it made interacting with people incredibly convenient. And the unintended consequence was, look, we lost that personal interaction, and people feel like they're just not connecting. You're always on. There's never an off. The office is universal, and it's everywhere. It's great if you want to travel the world and you want to be able to work from anywhere. It's terrible if you want to try and step boundaries. And so, again, with this concept of scarcity to abundance, when we move in that direction of abundance, it really puts the responsibility on the human to start making judgment calls and to have balance. And that's actually probably one of the worst things that humans are good at, is balance in general. But I've taken an opportunity to go and ride these waves. When people ask me, like, well, what was the initial wave of disruption that got you your first job? I would say, in some ways, the breaking up of AT&T in the 80s, right, was foundational in setting the stage for the internet. Combined with ARPANET and the ability to, or the desire to connect research institutions together, really pushed the forefront of communications. If AT&T hadn't broken up, of course the internet was going to happen, but it was probably going to take 5 or 10 years longer, because there was going to be a lot of inertia in the system to prevent the rapid innovation that was required in order to keep up with consumer demands. Again, these waves of disruption, from Cisco to Apple to Adobe. When I was at Adobe, we were riding a wave of video to the web disruption. And at that time, I think when I started at Adobe, 10% of the web was video. And when I left, I think over 50% of the web was video. And in about 7 years, right, the amount of information pushed through video into the web was enormous. And so, again, it's great to be able to watch video from anywhere. It's great to be able to listen to a song, but traditional business models, traditional ways of making money have to completely be rethought when that happens.
So we talk about these waves of technology, and I like how you mentioned you can't connect the dots going forward, but you can look at your career and you connect them going backwards.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of summarizing what you just mentioned. First, we connected the computers through the internet. And then we made that information searchable with Google. And then we made it mobile and interactive through things like iPhone, social media, gaming, music. And now we've taken all that information, and it's become the input for these large language models. So sitting in your seat and what you understand in the technology world, and knowing we have a legal audience here, if you're thinking about protection, privacy, what are your thoughts, kind of what's next, and how you protect folks? And that's what you're in the business of. Yep. Thinking about lawyers and how we protect folks, understanding that regulation generally lags behind technology. Kind of what are your thoughts, broad speaking, where this is headed and how folks can
Yeah.
safe?
Yeah, so if we focus on safety first, and I'll kind of like maybe address some of the other things second. If you focus on safety, we're in a situation where we need gap technology to allow, to signal to the human or to remove things that the human shouldn't interact with, right? Technically, my web browser, my cell phone, SMS client should be able to tell me what I can and cannot trust. The problem is it doesn't, right? Like I can go to a website, and a lot of times the website doesn't know if that's a fraudulent website. I get SMS texts all the time, as you do as well, and we have no idea. It's just from a phone number. And so we're in this in-between state, right, where the world of technology is trying to catch up with the fast-moving world of tech, of like criminal enterprise, right, that are capitalizing on that gap that they're shooting. And I think you're going to start to see, regulations come into place, laws come into place, where enterprises are going to now become responsible or required to reimburse their customers if they are scammed. Or become more responsible for taking down and kind of culling out the things that are, causing trust harm. Let's just use that term. Right now, it's the wild, wild west. And I am seeing things that criminal enterprises can do today that we never would have imagined 5 years ago. We look at criminal enterprise at Bolster almost as sophisticated marketing engines. So 10 years ago, fraud started with, can I get what's called a typo squad? Can I get a URL that looks similar to Bank of America, similar to Wells Fargo, and hope that someone makes a spelling mistake as they type it in? Today, they'll grab any website, DNS, they want, and they'll run an SMS campaign, a social media campaign, and a phishing email campaign to funnel the victim down to the website and try and get them to make a mistake and then click. And so the sophisticated nature of the attacker is growing faster than the sophistication of the defender. And so we're kind of in an arms race right now. And right now, the people that are on offense are winning. And they're winning very nicely if you start to look at the statistics on the amount of money that is lost over, year over year to fraud, embezzlement, cybercrime, all those things.
When you look at targets, I think of my parents in their age, and they're not sophisticated with technology, but I'm not super sophisticated either. Is it an age thing? Are young folks targets as well? Or who are the targets of these?
Yeah, my daughter was, she's a fan of an artist, and that artist announced a tour a year ago, and immediately she went on and bought merchandise for that tour. And we found out like 30 minutes later, we were like, actually, that's a scam. Like she went to a website that was created within probably 10 minutes of that artist announcing their tour in North America. And then my daughter bought a sweatshirt. And then, we got a sweatshirt in the mail, but it wasn't what we thought we were going to get. And like, again, and she's, at the time she was 16, 17. So like, the problem is that it takes a little bit of effort to do, a trust check. And validation or verification of something. And honestly, in a world where your attention is constantly under assault, and we're multitasking all the time, that's the last thing people have time for and that they want to think about.
So on that note, Bolster is often described as automating trust and brand protection online. Where do you think AI is doing a better job than humans in the space, and where might it still be falling short?
We use artificial intelligence on both sides of like the fence for what we do. We run a catch and kill campaign for our customers. So we catch fraud and then we kill it by taking it down. So we train AI models to identify websites for brand infringement, abuse, intent. That's something that 20 years ago you would have had to have teams of people in low-cost geos of the world reviewing websites and constantly filing tickets. We have very sophisticated search algorithms that can go out and they never have to be interfaced with by a human. And our AI models can flag it immediately and move it into a takedown space. There's always these gap areas where things get kicked up to or kicked out to a human, just from a common sense perspective. The frequency of that is getting less and less. And I expect that over the next 2 years, you are going to see rapid advancements in these large language models that are going to make it more and more capable, and are going to hopefully free the human up to do more and more sophisticated analysis and security operations tasks.
So
I recently heard Anthropic has a new model called Mythos, and they
Yeah.
aren't releasing it to the public because my understanding is Mythos exploits vulnerabilities in operating software and websites, and that can make it, I guess, a proficient hacker. I mean, I guess my concern would be you would have certainly advances on the defensive, but you would also have AI advances on the offensive, creating something of an arms race. Are you concerned about that chain of events occurring?
This is probably like the talk of the town right now in Silicon Valley, is the impact that Mythos is going to have, or large language models in general are going to have on what we consider like the attack surface that we've built over the last 30 years of the internet. I mean, imagine like every brick that's in this campus here has a vulnerability in it, and some of them are very unique. And then trying to go and like replace those bricks one by one, that's the situation that we're at right now with this very deeply mature internet infrastructure, from operating systems that are running critical infrastructure that controls power, water, nuclear, and tools that are just video consumption tools that are on ubiquitous, right? And so effectively the best way to think about it is Mythos has discovered viruses that were unknown to mankind that can now be specifically targeted out at anything at any point in time. And so that's why they've only revealed it to a certain set, because the race is on to try and patch these things as quickly as possible, which I'm skeptical is going to happen because it takes a lot of coordination, in order to push these changes out to this infrastructure.
Fascinating.
So as phishing and impersonation attacks are becoming more automated and scalable with AI, are you seeing a shift in how the attackers are operating, and how has that changed the way that your platform is responding?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point, because as I spoke about earlier, they're think about them more as sophisticated marketing engines than cybercrimes. What used to be like a buy for our customer was they would want the web module, and they didn't need the social media module or the abuse mailbox module. Now what we're seeing is our customers need multiple modules because they need to shut down these different dimensions of attack that are actually now connecting in sophisticated ways that turn into like the perfect synchronized attack for their industry. The other thing that we're seeing is that maybe 5 years ago, the cost of running one of these attacks was so expensive that the criminal enterprises focused on enterprise technology. So they would go after the large banks, the large video streaming providers, right? The brands that you interact with on a daily basis. Today, the switching cost is very low for them, so they will retarget. So they'll go from an enterprise and they'll say, hey, look, let's go focus on this credit union in Pennsylvania. That we think has all these people in it, and then they'll run sophisticated ad campaigns and marketing campaigns at those users, using the exact same tricks that they use to trick the Bank of America people, customers into making a mistake. And then they'll just rinse and repeat. They'll say, okay, now let's move to rideshare. Let's then take that over to consumer-facing cowboy boots or something. It is remarkable how quickly they can move, retarget, and then use the same playbook over and over again.
I want to jump ahead and then come back to these next questions, because I don't want to put you on the hot seat the entire time. Noor, I want to come to you briefly. Listening to Rod speak about his work and you finding this space and being interested in it and getting the amazing fellowship you've gotten, can you speak a little bit to how you have narrowed in on that line of work, how you found passion in there, and how you look at it going forward, your excitement working in this space, graduating? Can you kind of talk a little bit about your fellowship and how you kind of have narrowed in on this specialty?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for highlighting it. I actually became interested in the space of privacy and data protection law in early on and around high school and college, specifically with children's online protection and how their data was being collected and used by large companies, and that really opened the door to the interest of how information is being used and collected in so many different ways across different industries and technologies. And so that's actually what led me to apply to law school. So I knew coming in I really wanted to hone in and pursue this area of the law, especially as we're seeing a lot of combination with what's happening with AI. And I think the core tension that we're talking about today with how do we balance innovation with also legal frameworks that are in place that are struggling to keep up makes it a really exciting space to be going into. And it's also changing every day. So that's something that I'm really excited. And the fellowship itself is called the Weston Fellowship. It's with the IAPP. And a lot of it is focused on research and writing on different issues in the space and publishing on that, while also keeping track of different state legislation that is happening with privacy and AI. And so I'm really excited to be graduating and working in this space as it relates to what we're talking about today.
One question I have for you that's always frustrated me is that because for the internet to move so quickly, they kind of had to give the technology away. And then the statement that I tell people is like, look, when they give the technology away, you're the product. And they basically said, all right, we're going to give it to you, but then we're going to advertise back to you. And in order to advertise back to you very well, we almost need to be a privacy invading piece of technology because we really want to figure out who's sitting behind the web browser, who's sitting behind the phone. Are those days gone? Like, has the ship passed where like we're never ever going to fight that battle to claw back consumer privacy because it's such an ad-driven world? Or do you actually see a time or a chance, an opportunity where we can start to win back data rights for the individual consumer while maintaining the quality of the service that they've grown to expect from these platforms such as Meta, or other free platforms like that?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're seeing more and more people becoming aware of how much their privacy has been invaded. So you talked about, digital advertising. I think in the ad tech space, it's so important that, companies are able to target to consumers, but then what does that mean on the other side for consumers' rights? I think pointing to Europe with GDPR is a great framework to show how consumers have or can have a lot of rights. And we see in California as well, they have a really great
CCPA.
Yeah, exactly, which protects their consumers in California. So I don't think that it's a battle that's lost. I think it's something that we're going to have to continually work on to balance that innovation with protecting digital autonomy for consumers.
To build on that a little bit, I think Noor's certainly right that it's good that we have these frameworks in place and an increasing number of them. I mean, it's sort of like I use the analogy of a patchwork quilt and privacy class where you have different modes of compliance depending on states and federal and international aspects, but most or all of these regimes are built on a notice and control or a notice and consent model, and so that what that's doing is putting the onus on the consumer to self-manage their privacy. And
exactly.
As you mentioned, people are so overloaded in terms of cognitive impact based on use of these technologies that they can't possibly manage their privacy on every single website. I am intrigued by the recent social media addiction cases where the issue hasn't been, it's up to the consumer to manage their privacy, that the design of the technology and the platforms is an issue. So perhaps regulation can focus beyond a notice of control or a notice of consent to map onto what is addictive design and how can we regulate to prevent such addiction.
Yeah, they've created like the perfect intersection of convenience, addiction, and basically data exploitation. And it's almost impossible for the average consumer to understand the trade-offs that they're making, what they're being tracked with, how they're being tracked, and how these ads are precision created to get them to consume something that drives the cycle back over and over and over again. So this is, for me, has been a sad kind of evolution of the network that, back in the 90s when I started working on it in 97 at Cisco, the internet was at, I think, it was kind of in its puppy dog stage, and we all had these like really, happy ideas of what it was going to become. And it's been bent into the path of like, consumption through free, distribution, built on top of, ad networks that are almost impossible to fight back against.
So I want to point out a couple stats related to financial impact and fraud trends and get your thoughts on this with what you guys do, what Bolster is all about. So national targeted loss, total Gen AI facilitated fraud losses in the United States are forecasted to hit $40 billion by 2027. And another number here.
It's a big number.
Global scam losses reached $1 trillion in 2024, fueled by the speed and personalization afforded by Gen AI.
Yep.
So with your job,
Yep.
running Bolster,
Yeah.
do you see what you guys do as trying to make a dent in numbers like that?
100%. Those are our tailwinds, which is a horrible thing to say, but as the fraud market grows, so does Bolster. 5 years ago, I think this space was not considered interesting for venture capital to invest in. Over the last just probably 3 months, you've seen multi-million-dollar investments in competitors to us. Brand new spaces from very sophisticated investors. So the CEO of Palo Alto Networks is an investor in one of my competitors. Satya Nadella is an investor of Microsoft, is an investor in one of my competitors. Never would have seen that 5 years ago. The world changed in November or October of 2022 when ChatGPT was released. If you had asked me in 2021 if I thought AI would have an impact on cybersecurity and fraud, I would have said no, because I didn't even understand. My mental picture of AI was something that would just do chess or something. What it's turned into is it's a machine that can do anything. And so again, to go back to my scarcity to abundance, we've gone from scarcity of intelligence to an abundance of intelligence, and how you focus that intelligence on the good or the bad matters. And what we're seeing is criminal enterprises focusing the new intelligence that they're getting from these tools that are driving these statistics that you just brought up that are almost victimless crimes, right? It's like, who owns that problem? It's like a global warming problem. Who owns the global warming problem? Well, we all do. And what we're doing at Bolster is we're saying, okay, look, large consumer brands, do you want to reduce that attack surface that is your brand name, image, and likeness? An attack surface that is projected onto your customer, not owned by your, the employee of the company, right? And so, you're at Fortinet over the summer. Fortinet's job is to prevent employees of a company from getting cyber attacked. CISOs today are not focused on preventing their customers from getting attacked. They're fired when their employees get attacked, but they're not fired when 500 of their customers get attacked. And so that's the change we're also seeing, is like the responsibility is now moving to a sophisticated cyber buyer, where they're realizing that this is not a brand and a legal problem. And I know that this is a legal conversation here in this room, but we are seeing a migration of this technology away from brand and legal up into cyber, because they have the budgets and they're trying to link these two worlds of cyber and fraud together in order to figure out what in the world is going on based upon those tailwinds that you just brought up at the very beginning of this question.
It's actually helpful for me to hear you, who's an expert in this field, to say that a few years ago you didn't foresee some of the things you're working on and focus on today.
Yeah.
Because we as lawyers are still trying to catch up and understand our clients. You guys being one of them. So it makes me feel a little bit better that I'm not completely ignorant.
I mean, one thing I think that's interesting. I mean, it's my core specialty as a trademark lawyer and
Yep.
scholar and teacher. The core trademark framework revolves around the Lanham Act, which was built in 1946 and enables a certain degree of brand protection, and enabling businesses to sue under doctrines like infringement and dilution and counterfeiting to a certain extent. But I feel like, given the prevalence of threats to brands online, I mean, perhaps, are takedowns enough, or are you enabling brand owners to be able to sue under trademark doctrines or perhaps copyright doctrines? It may be that these intellectual property regimes are experiencing a degree of doctrinal collapse due to the disruption that AI is bringing. So I was just wondering your thoughts
I
on
think
that.
that's a great way of describing it. Those policies are unenforceable, flat out unenforceable. I will be in London in 3 weeks at the International Trademark Association at INTA in London, and we went to it in San Diego last year, and people are coming up to us and they're saying, do you do takedowns? We don't know how to get ahead of this. The entire trademark industry was really focused, 10 years ago on DNS, right? Like, hey, can I get all the URLs that would be, a version of my name to prevent someone from attacking me? And as I explained at the very beginning, like, that's an old attack. The new attack is just send out SMS messages and drive them to a website that doesn't even have, the name of the brand in it. But it has all the logos. And then that website is up for 36 hours, 48 hours. And then we shut it down, we move infrastructure, and we're on to something else. So you're literally, trying to fight a quickly migrating or evolving virus that, you've got, what year was this? 1948 is when those laws were enacted?
46, I believe.
Yeah, we're talking about, things that are 80 years old. And they can't keep up anymore. They're just not designed for it because the technology has evolved and just changed so quickly.
And then maybe I could also push you a bit on the right of publicity front, name, image, and likeness.
Yep.
This is another patchwork of state laws, some by statute, some via common law. They're all doing slightly, or in some cases, very different things. I mean, there is a licensable, alienable right of publicity that derives from misappropriation, the privacy tort. I mean, do you think a federal right of publicity law would be a good evolution in this space, or how would you like to see the law evolving given the disruption in terms of NIL?
I mean, as a basketball fan, I have a few comments on that. I think there's so many unintended consequences from, if you had told me that the Ed O'Bannon case, when it first got introduced, was going to do this to college athletics, I would have said that doesn't make any sense. I don't know the answer to your question, but I can tell you that I was at a VC dinner last week. And my VC, one of the investors in my company is also an investor in a platform that is basically purchased by universities to help students manage NIL. So large SEC school, these are not small schools, are buying this platform to help their students plug into that platform in order to harness the power of the NIL force of disruption, right? The wave of opportunity that's coming out of it. And when you see VC dollars funneling into technology like that, that tells you that they have zero confidence that it is going to get regulated at all by law. It tells you that there is money to be made, it's going to be changing quickly, and that there's a huge opportunity to capture value and to create value at the same time with a platform like that. So I'll just say the behavior I'm seeing in the tech world leads me to believe that this is going to be an unsolved problem for a long time.
So if you could design the ideal balance between human expertise, AI systems, and a legal regulatory framework, what do you think that would look like?
I think it's a tough question for me to answer. And I'm going to say the reason is that I think within 2 years, there's nothing AI won't be able to do that a human can do. And I think we're on the cusp of that already. And it's going to come down to regulation of the training of the model, the data that goes into the model, and can you quantify why that data was good, not good, what is it based on? And you're going to get down into literally the dimensions of that data that then train that model and the verification of that model. And that model will then turn into the watchdog, right, that goes out and does things and verifies things. We're so far away from being able to contain this problem. It's a fascinating area from a legal perspective. It's a fascinating area from a technology perspective. Again, just watch where the dollars are going and in the investments in the cybersecurity space, in the fraud space, in the legal space. This area is ripe for disruption. And I don't know how any kind of legal framework is going to evolve faster than the technology is going to just make that legal framework obsolete within, minutes.
Does that lead you to be pessimistic about the current moment with artificial intelligence, or do you see some opportunities for optimism here?
So that's why I'm here this week in Chapel Hill, is to lecture to the students that I think it is a scary time, flat out scary time. And I think the analogy I'm using in my presentation is that you go to school almost to learn how to play an instrument, but we need to teach these kids how to conduct a symphony, because there's nothing AI will be able to do, right, or nothing a human will be able to do that the AI cannot. So again, you take a calculus class, they're teaching you the how to do something, not the why. You take a physics class, a biology class, a lot of times a legal class. This is the how we enforce that law, not the why. Within months, weeks, days, seconds, who knows when this is, AI is going to be able to do every single thing a human can do. And now the question is going to be like, the why are you doing it? And how do you start to conduct those AI agents to solve the problem that you've chosen to focus on? So I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of creative destruction. The destruction is going to be fast, the creation is going to be slow, and I think you're going to see jobs that we thought were rock solid that are going to have to evolve. And they're going to have to evolve way faster than any job has ever evolved in the past hundreds of years, probably, from the Industrial Revolution on. This is the fastest moving technology I have personally ever seen, and I've been working in this area for 29 years now. And as I've said, I've worked on the internet, I've worked on mobile, I've worked on video conferencing, video to the web, video distribution. This beats anything I've ever seen by multiple orders of magnitude.
Frightening.
I think it's frightening, or do you look at the wave and you say, hey, that's really cool, I want to go surf that wave? And I think it's really just a perspective question. That's what I'm hoping. There could be a dystopian view that, hey, look, we don't know what what motivates humanity in the next 5 years. My hope is that humanity figures out how to motivate itself to do really positive things with this technology, because you cannot destroy knowledge, and we're past the point of no return here. It's over.
So while we have you here in Chapel Hill, your alma mater, whether you're thinking about an audience of law students or undergrad students, you spoke to a little bit, your advice for them, whether they're graduating law school and going out into the world, or undergrad, your advice, generally speaking, on how to protect themselves, protect their data, how to check websites, how to confirm what they're looking at is authentic or real. Do you have advice for folks?
I'll give you two pieces of advice. One, how to protect themselves, and then one, how do I think they can ride this wave of opportunity that I think is very, very powerful. From a security perspective, it just takes a few more seconds to check the URL, to check the source. Remember, anybody can send you an email, anybody can send you an SMS. The assumption we make, right, it kind of borders on what we call information asymmetry, right? Our assumption is that the sender knows as much about us as we do, right? Or that we know as much about the sender, right? And generally, that's not true anymore. A lot of times the sender knows way more about us than we do, and they're assaulting us with this, something that kind of looks semi-authentic. And it's going to take a few more seconds to verify, do I know that person? Should I be responding? Is this even pertinent to what I've been working on in the past 2-3 days, whatever, context checking. That's really hard to do, right? While people want to be having 5 SMS conversations at a time and listening to Spotify and then walking to class or worried about a final or something like that. So it just really takes a little bit more effort, which is not a great answer. That's why we're in a bad situation right now, because the solution is to get pushed down into your phone, into your web browser, right? Into the voice codec of the phone to make sure it's not like a deep fake, audio call or something. Until then, it's really, you're going to have to use your brain a little bit better. And then, when it comes to riding this wave of AI opportunity, my advice is to chase your curiosity, find something that inspires you, and go and start going deep into that rabbit hole using these AI tools to help you explore and understand what problems you want to solve. And like the point I make, in my lecture tomorrow is that, every business is a solution to a problem. What problem do you want to solve? If you're going into law, what problem do you want to solve? Okay, why? Why do you want to solve that problem? Because we know that you can solve it. You're never, ever going to be faced with, I need to read a 200-page contract again in 6 hours and understand it, because you're going to be able to push that through a large language model, get a summary, dive deep yourself. But the ability to move quickly now has never been better. And so now you need to ask yourself, where do I want to spend my time and my resources? You should chase what makes you curious. You should chase the problems you want to solve and understand how you're creating value in that space. And that is not something that most people ask themselves at all when they graduate. Most people don't ask themselves that on a daily basis, even when they're 20 years into their career. They just do what they're told to do and what they learned how to do the previous 20 years. And this is the transition, I think, that all people have to go through.
What scares me is not that a lawyer doesn't have to read a 600-page contract anymore. It's that the lawyer will no longer know how to read that 600-page contract. And
we will have software engineers that don't know how to write computer code. Like my grandchildren will think I was like a coal miner. I would write code one line at a time. My engineering team at Bolster slams out code using large language models probably 80% of the time. We're building features that should have taken months, and we can build them in like a day. I've never seen technology like this. And it makes sense, right? Like if I asked you to cook me a meal, you don't know how to go and slaughter an animal and grow some wheat. You just go to the grocery store and you get it, and then you combine it into like an interesting meal. So I feel you, because with artificial intelligence, you have to enter every single situation and ask yourself this: is it a construction site or is it a gym? Okay, if you're going to school, the majority of the time, you need to think about this place as a gym so that you can get into good shape. Once you're out, you are paid to use it as a construction site and to architect and to solve problems as quickly as possible. Because frankly, I do not care if my engineers write the code one line at a time or if it gets slammed out by Claude Code. As long as I get that feature out and delivered at high quality, that's what we need to do. And that's the tension here.
Any parting shots, questions while we have Mr. Schultz here? Well, I'd just like to say thank you. This has been fascinating. I'm always learning in this space. Thanks to everyone for being here. Welcome back to Chapel Hill.
It's good to be back.
It's really good to see you. And I guess that's it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Great to meet you guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.